Hello, everyone. Hi. Thanks for coming. My name is John Hendricks. I'm the chair of the MFA Illustration and Visual Culture program here at WashU. Thank you for coming to the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. We have an amazing lecture today. Carson Ellis is here in person. I want to tell you a little bit about her work before she comes up. Carson is an author and illustrator of many best-selling picture books, including Home and Do Is Talk, which was a Caldecott Honor book. She's a recipient of the E.B. White Read Aloud Award, and she's illustrated numerous books. Mysterious Benedict Society, The Composer is Dead by Lemony Snicket, The Wildwood Chronicles, of course, by her husband Colin Meloy. And Carson has been awarded medals from the Society of Illustrators. Her work on Wildwood Imperium and for Dillweed's Revenge both won silver medals. She has been an illustrator-in-residence, of course, for Colin's band, the Decemberists, and received Grammy nominations in 2016 and 2018 for album art design. And, of course, she does many editorial works throughout the years for The New Yorker, The New York Times, The New York Review of Books, and many, many others. So after she talks, we'll have a little bit of time for a Q&A afterwards. So will you please join me in welcoming Carson Ellis.
Thanks, John. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming out here on a Thursday night to talk about illustration. It is totally an honor to be here. I am Carson Ellis, and this is me in 8th grade. I like to start talks with this picture because it's mortifying and I think it's sort of funny. It's definitely okay to laugh at this picture of me. That's what it's there for. But also I think it's kind of like maybe a window into my soul. And I think it can never hurt when you get up to talk in front of a room full of people to show them that deep inside lurks this nerdy adolescent, which is absolutely true. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City. So this is me in 8th grade at Fox Lane Middle School in Bedford Hills, New York. A little bit about me. I like cats. I'm an artist. I like rainbows and sunshine and oranges, and I'm nice. I made that when I was a kid, obviously, but still true. I liked to draw and write when I was a kid. That was something I started doing pretty early on. My most abiding passions, my truest obsessions were cats and ponies. And this is an early creative writing attempt. It's a short story about a girl who gets a pony for her 8th birthday, which was like one of my deepest fantasies. It didn't come true, but other fantasies did, so it's okay. And I in the brown part of this picture, it says part 1, but I know that there's no part 2. This story is just this page and like 3 sentences on the next page. It would take many, many decades for me to finish writing and illustrating a book. But I was on this tip from a pretty early age. I just have one more early childhood illustration because this one is so funny. It's like a golden-haired princess telepathically connected to a unicorn by a rainbow, and they're crying because they're separated, they're apart. It's like another window into my soul. I continued to draw as I got older. I'm not sure when I drew this, but I would say early high school. And it's not my proudest work. There's so much going on in this picture, right? There's like an American flag over one eye, and there's a horse in a bubble, and there's a faceless human holding an orb. It's just like everything. But I'm not like showing it to you because I love it, but I'm showing it to you because I am proud of the amount of work that went into it. It's clear that it was a laborious drawing. There's a lot of stippling, there's a lot of detail, and that from a reasonably young age, I think I was making art, I had what I would call now an art practice. I was drawing all the time, whether anybody wanted me to, whether anybody saw what I was drawing. I had this sort of compulsion to do it, which I feel grateful for. That compulsion to draw is one of the few steady threads that has run through my life, and I think I probably wouldn't be where I am without it. When I was a teenager, I did not draw this. Maurice Sendak did. But I was sort of a gloomy teenager. I was kind of depressed, or maybe disaffected. And I loved to draw still, and I loved to write poetry. And at some point, I was down in the basement of my family home, and I found this big box full of kids' books. And they were down there because my sister and I were teenagers. We had outgrown them. Nobody was reading them. But I found in this box of books the picture book Outside Over There by Maurice Sendak. Do you guys know this book? Any of you? A few. Maurice Sendak's gorgeous Caldecott Honor winning magnum opus. It's an incredible book. The illustrations are these sumptuous, hallucinatory, super labor-intensive illustrations. And the text is really moody and poetic and vague and pretty dark. And it's the story of a girl named Ida, and she has a little brother. And she's supposed to be watching him, but some goblins steal him through a window, and they replace him with an ice facsimile. And she has to go off and rescue him. So this is how she does it. She flies through the air with a horn. And when she finds the goblins, they are all disguised as babies, and she has to play her horn, and one by one they turn back into goblins, and she rescues her brother. And that's a weird story. And the way it's told, it's not even easy to follow. Like, even if that made sense to you, the story is told in such a kind of dreamy, impressionistic way that it's hard to even follow what's happening in it. And this book, it struck such a deep chord in me as a teenager because it was just really gorgeous, and it was really dark and strange. And I was so surprised that it was for kids. And because I loved to draw and I loved to write, I was constantly on the lookout for places where maybe these two things were combining in the cultural world, in the literary world. I just wanted to do both of these things, and I didn't know where and how. And I saw this book, and it just cracked it wide open for me. I was like, oh, it's all about picture books. That's where you do it. You have this incredibly broad, amorphous readership and no rules. And I just thought that was amazing. So I kind of became obsessed with picture books from that point on and made it my very vague plan to do it for a living. Not to brag, but I was most artistic in my senior high school yearbook, along with my male counterpart, Dylan Lorenz, who looks exactly like me. Don't know what's up with that. So I was still very much into drawing when I was graduating from high school, but I was a very bad student. I barely graduated. I had to go to summer school just to get my diploma. And when I was a senior in high school, my parents really wanted to know what my intentions were, and I had none, except that I knew I didn't want to go to college because I had just barely graduated from high school. I was like, why would I put myself back in that situation? And my parents were like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I lived in this small suburban town, and I didn't like it very much. So I said, I'll just travel around in my car and see the country. I'll follow the Grateful Dead. And they were like, okay, where are you going to live when you're not driving around in your car? And I was like, I guess I'll live here. And they were like, we're going to charge you rent. Where are you going to work? And there wasn't anywhere to work in my town. It was Blockbuster or McDonald's. And I was like, I guess McDonald's. And my parents are like, that's a terrible plan. And I was lucky in that my grandfather had set aside this modest college fund for me, but I just didn't want it because I didn't want to go back to school. And my parents were like, well, what if you thought of it not as going to school, but getting out of here? Was there anywhere you want to live? And I was like, yes, actually, there's somewhere I do really want to live. It's the state of Montana, which at the time was, like a place I knew nothing about. It was like the hinterland of America to me. It was the middle of the Rocky Mountains, and I didn't know anyone there. But I would see pictures of it sometimes, and my dad had subscriptions to some outdoor magazines, and I would stumble upon these pictures like this one of the Mission Mountains, and something would just light up in me. I felt this strong magnetic pull to the state of Montana. So I applied, and I got in, and I went. And even though I really wanted to be an illustrator, this college did not have an illustration program. That would have been cool. That would have been a cool thing for young Carson Ellis to have taken into consideration. But I think I was just on this idea of getting far away from home with the money that I had, and not so much what happened after college. So I went to the University of Montana, and I got a painting degree because there were only a couple of fine art options there. And sometimes people ask me if I'm glad that I went to college. Don't worry, I realize we're all at a university right now, and I'm not about to say that I bitterly regret it. I don't bitterly regret it. If I was going to go back, I would do it again and again and again. And I think that because of a number of reasons, but mostly just because it was this period of time where for the first time, not only did I think of myself as an artist in a real way and my practice as a real kind of important and valid thing to devote my time to, but also I had this really meaningful creative community in college. And I know just from talking to some students here already that some of you guys are experiencing this too, where your friends are artists and everybody has ideas that you're pursuing in these really open-hearted, kind of excited ways. And my friends in college were writers and musicians and dancers and visual artists. And it was so energizing to be around this community of people like sort of following our crazy dreams. One of the people in my crazy community of people following their crazy dreams was this guy with the glasses. That's Colin, my husband. He was just my friend back then. He was actually my roommate in a big house with a bunch of people. And he is a musician and a writer. And he has a band called the Decemberists, but in college he had a band called Tarkio. And we met and became very quickly sort of creatively kindred. We became collaborators, and we always wanted to work on things together. So, and he was sort of like a little above, like next level in terms of his ambition. Like most of us had these projects we were doing, but in these sort of lackadaisical ways, but he would like work 2 shifts and then book time in a recording studio, and then he'd record a song, and then it would be like on the radio the next week, and I was like, who is this guy? I'm gonna hitch my wagon to his star. That's amazing. So in college, I made a lot of like posters for his band. This is a Noam Chomsky themed, any fans out there? Noam Chomsky fans or Tarkio fans? We were so into Noam Chomsky. So it's a pun. It's like, Tarkio, do I know him? I'm Chomskying at the bit to go see them. During these years, I think I graduated college in 1997. I moved around so much. I was in Missoula, and then I was in the south of France for a semester. I went back to Missoula. Then I was in San Francisco for a bit when I was a hot dog vendor. And then I went back to Missoula and finished up college, and then I lived in Minneapolis, where I was a cocktail waitress. And then I went to Vermont, where I was a cocktail waitress. And then I moved to San Francisco, where I was a cocktail waitress. And then I moved to Portland, where I became a bartender, which was really awesome. And Portland is where I've been for 25 years, or in that area. The thing that drew me to Portland was that a lot of my Missoula friends had migrated there, so it was like that creative community was living there, and San Francisco was so expensive. It was so hard to live there, and I lived in a warehouse. It had no heat. I was so cold. And in Portland, a lot of people were living in this other warehouse that did have heat and was much cheaper, and it just seemed like they were living the life. So I moved up there and stayed forever. This is me and Colin. We were just friends, but we soon became sweethearts. This is our courtship, I guess. Looked kind of like this. We moved into this. He was living in this warehouse, and I moved into, and our friend Steve lived there, and our friend Nathan lived there, lots of college friends, and there were other people we met there that weren't from college that were also creative people, and it was a total scene. It was so fun. And at the time that I moved up there, Colin was starting his band, the Decemberists, and he wanted me to make art for his band. And he had no money to pay me. He worked in a pizza place, so I got like all the free pizza I could eat, which was good because I was broke, so it was okay. And ultimately, I had graduated from college with this painting degree, and I really wanted to be an illustrator, but I didn't know how to do it. I just didn't know anything about it. I did not make any connections in that world, and being a fine art major at the University of Montana, I didn't know the difference between book illustration and editorial illustration, and so I just didn't know how to do it. I took a couple of sad stabs at it, where like I rode my bike to a newspaper with like a portfolio and was like, if you'd like to hire me. And then I never got a phone call. So when Colin was like, hey, I need like album art and a design for a t-shirt, and I'm gonna build a website, will you make illustrations for it? It was like suddenly my hot friend had like a million illustration ideas for me. I just didn't even care that nobody was paying me for them. I was so excited to have an excuse to do all that work. And it was sort of this amazing like crash course in illustration for me. I've made so many Decemberists album covers. This is a sampling of them, but there's like 20-something of them. And I also made those t-shirt designs and those flyers at Kinko's and that website art, and also props for photo shoots and stage sets. And it was like all of this super multidisciplinary art project that was always changing, and I was always learning, and it was really fun. And it's been really interesting because I feel like every phase I've gone through as an artist or an illustrator, every medium I've become obsessed with, every subject matter that has sort of captured my fancy is represented in a Decemberist album, because I've just made so many of them over the years. So they're this funny kind of timeline of my creative evolution, which I always think is sort of neat and a weird thing to have. They're not in order here. I just put them in the order I like. But like you can see that one on the top left, that was after I went to the American Museum of Folk Art for the first time, the American Folk Art Museum. It's very folk art museum inspired, and there's oil paintings and gouache and graphite and collage and photo and et cetera. This eventually became a slicker operation, and this was one of the album packaging things that we were nominated for a Grammy for. Me and this design firm called Smog, who work in LA, who are wonderful, who we did this with. This album is called What a Terrible World, What a Beautiful World. And I'm not sure if this is still the album art design landscape. Someone in this room probably knows better than me. But at the time that we made this, people were really not buying music very much anymore. Like most people had sort of switched to streaming, and so record companies were trying really hard to figure out how to get people to keep buying music. And so the vinyl box set designs got more and more elaborate until they're like this. You know, they have like prints and patches and a banner and all this stuff kind of beautifully designed into this big box. But I digress. I'm going to go back in time a little. This is my older son, Hank. He's 18 now. And so I had been trying really hard to be an illustrator with no luck. But then what ended up happening was as the Decemberists gained popularity and became more visible, people saw my art, and that's when actually I did start to get hired by people who didn't know me to do illustration work. And it wasn't very promising at first. It was like I would get hired to do editorial illustration, you know, for $80, and I'd have to do it in like a day, but I was still very stoked, like no complaints, especially in the beginning. And the more I did that work, the more people kept hiring me, and eventually a literary agent named Steve Malk contacted me to ask me if I wanted to work on picture books, which of course had been my heart's deepest desire since I was a teenager. And I told him, yes, I would love to. So I hired on with him. And the first book I worked on was The Mysterious Benedict Society, which is this middle grade graphic novel. And it was sort of a big book. I was like really lucky that this was the first book I worked on. And it was fun to work on. My job for it was to do that cover. And then for each chapter, I had to make a chapter opener, which is like an illustration that opens the chapter. So an illustration on the first page of the chapter. And they asked me to make an illustration and design some kind of hand-lettered type treatment for each chapter. And there were like 35 chapters in the book or something. And this was kind of a dream job for me because I loved hand lettering and drawing so much. It was like at this time, there was no end to my enthusiasm for poring over books of fonts and alphabets and trying to hand letter them. So I loved this. And that was the first book, but I went on to do a bunch of others. These three at the bottom are collaborative books with Colin. They're called the Wildwood Chronicles. And they were the culmination of a lot of years of us fantasizing about making a book together that would be like some kind of mystical fantasy middle grade novel. The two books on the top are books I wrote myself. Of the two, Do Is Talk is my favorite. And I was thinking I would read this to you. Are you guys cool with that? Have you guys been read a picture book in the past 20 years? Yeah, the one kid is like, yes. Okay, so the most important thing to know about this book, it's about a plant that grows and dies, and it's about the microcosmic world of little creatures that's revolving around it. But it's what I would consider a wordless picture book. There's no text except for dialogue, and the dialogue is all in bug language. So I will sort of talk you through it. Do Is Talk. This book starts on the title page, as some picture books do. You can see there's a little green thing in the middle, and a caterpillar is examining it. And then the green thing changes a little, and these two bugs, which are damselflies, come out. And one of them says, Do Is Talk. And the other says, Mana Zoot. They're sort of speculating about it. Now they're gone. And it seems that the little green shape is a plant. It has begun to unfurl. And the little caterpillar is saying ta-ta, which actually means the same thing in English as it does in bug language. It just means bye. Then these three beetles show up, and one of them is like, Do Is Talk. And another says, Ma ebedauank plunk. And the third one says, Du kimma plunk. And the second one says, Mana Zoot. Now the three beetles are trying to get up into this plant. They're trying to get up there, but they're too short. And one says, Rubata unk ribble. And the other says, su, which means yes. And then the third says, bor inken iki. So it's sort of like someone made a suggestion, and then she was like, yes, and the other one made another suggestion. So they turn around and they're like knocking on the door or knocking on the front of this log, and they're like, icky, icky, icky. And then the log opens, it's a little door, and it turns out icky is a pill bug, and they're like, icky, rubata unk ribble. So icky comes out with this super long ladder, and the ladybug is like, unk ribble! Do you guys know what a ribble is? No, nobody can guess? It's a ladder. So they're so excited. Now they're up in the plant. Icky's on his little lawn chair. And she makes another suggestion. She's like, Ru daden duden unk furt. And they're like, Sue, Sue, yeah, yeah. They agree with her. But now it's nighttime and everyone's gone. This grasshopper is playing this lonely song by the light of the full moon. This slug, who has been slowly kind of spying on them this whole time, comes out of hiding to check out this leaf. And of course, the plant is growing bigger on every page. Now it's daytime, and they've got a bunch of building materials, plus Icky's lawn chair, and this mushroom that they cut down, and they're going to do something with all this stuff. There's also a spider on the left who's just casually observing. Still casually observing, and they've built this beautiful fort. It has a place to lounge in the lounge chair, it has a rope swing, it has a little house where you can sit and read. It's like the most amazing fort. And the little beetle is swinging on the rope swing, and she's saying, Rup fort, which means our fort. But then the spider came, and he destroyed their fort. And they're so mad. They're like, Vubek, booby Vubek, which means spider, stupid spider. And then she's really sad, and she's like, Rup furt. But then this bird just flies in and steals the spider. And Icky the pillbug does what pillbugs do, and his little hat falls off. And now they're all in shock, except for her. She's like, Sue! Now they're cleaning it up. They're like, they have to get rid of all the spider webs, so they're sweeping and mopping and getting it back in order. But something's happening at the top of this plant that is really drawing the attention of a lot of bystanders. And people are kind of coming out of the woodwork to be like, do his talk. And everyone is just kind of marveling at this thing that's happening at the top of the flower. This thing, this blossom that's opening. And then it blooms. And it's the most beautiful flower anyone has ever seen. They're like, Unk Gladenboot is Unk Gladenboot. Unk Scrivedeli Gladenboot. And then someone's like, is Talk Unk Gladenboot? And everybody's like, you didn't know probably that under that little stone on the left, there was a salamander. Or that inside of that branch, there was a little green caterpillar with a top hat, or that little twig was actually a stick bug. Do you see that stick bug? He's just been there the whole time. But then, sadly, as always happens with flowers, they wilt and they fade, and it gets cold. There's Icky and his wife Uki. They're dressed for cold weather. And up in the fort, which is becoming more and more decrepit as this plant begins to topple, the three little beetles are dressed in warm clothes, and they're drinking cocoa. And Icky and Uki are like, Tata Udas. Udas are kids. Bye, kids. And they're like, Tata Icky, Tata Uki. The ants are going home. And now it's collapsing, and it's so decrepit, it's just uninhabitable, and they have to leave, and they say, Tata furt. And now it's night again. And the grasshopper is playing his lonely song by the light of the moon, looking out over the sad view of this flower, which is slowly dying. But but something is happening with the cocoon that the caterpillar made. Should I turn the page? Oh my God, it's a beautiful moth. And she's whirling around in the sky and she's dancing to the music that the grasshopper is playing. And he's risen to his feet in an ecstasy. He's never had anyone to dance to the music he's playing before. And they have this beautiful, incredible moment. And the flower's almost gone. And then it's winter. And everything's gone. But then it's spring. And all of these little shapes, like we saw on the title page of the book, are sprouting up, where the flower has died. And this little cricket wanders out, and she's like, do as talk, which means, yes, well done, everybody. You now speak bug language. This book, oh, thanks. This book is so close to my heart because I feel like it's a book that I would have loved so much when I was a kid. I was just like a kid who was so into little creatures and always flipping over logs and rocks to see what was underneath them. This is me and my sister painting on a fence. And for people interested in fashion, I would just like to point out that I'm wearing a sailor's dress with a corduroy sports jacket over it and a bungee cord for a belt. I'm like very proud of that look. I had to go give talks at schools and read this book to kids, and I thought, oh, it would be cool to show kids some art that I made when I was a kid. I wonder if I have anything that relates to this book at all. And I was looking through these childhood sketchbooks, and I found this, which is crazy. I mean, it's crazy sexist. He's like, what legs? And the sun is winking like, yeah. So, like, I don't know where my sad child brain got that, but it's also crazy because, like, look at their shoes and their hats and her purse and even, like, the little flower that's coming off her hat. And then look at these guys. It's, like, the same thing. And there's something so encouraging about that to me because it made me realize that the things that I've loved when I was a kid have been these through lines through my life, and they change, and my obsessions with them kind of come and go. But it made me feel like really connected to the kid artist that started this whole journey a million years ago, which felt cool and meaningful, and it's a nice thing to sort of stop and take stock of once in a while. I have made lots of books for kids. These are some more of them. These are all books I illustrated for other people, except for that In the Half Room one, which I actually wrote with my kid. I still make a lot of posters. Some of them are really lo-fi, some of them are flyers, some of them are fancy printed painting posters, and some of them are silkscreen. It's still something I love to do. And I do some illustration, some editorial work. These are both for The New Yorker, and that's Herman Melville on the right. And illustration is funny for me because it's sort of all I ever wanted to do, and it feels like a wild miracle that I figured out how to make a living doing it, and yet I'm mad about it all the time. And I'm mad about it in lots of ways, but I'm especially mad about it in the editorial context because I hate being told what to do creatively, and that's kind of the job. And the way editorial illustration works for people who don't know anything about it is you'd usually get hired by someone like an art director, and you're given a brief or an assignment. You do a couple sketches with different ideas, and then they pick an idea, and then they ask you to revise it once or twice, and then you, in like sketch form, and then you make finished art. And for me, I feel like they always choose the thing that I like the least, like the idea I really don't like, and then they have me revise it a couple times until I hate it, which I find very demoralizing. And I think in general, illustration I love it so much, and I hate it so much. It's such a mixed relationship I have with it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I think in every illustration project, there's typically some inspired moment and some other moment that just kind of feels like drudgery. And there's moments where you feel autonomous, and there's moments where you feel like you're being asked to not follow your creative instincts, which feels bad, can feel demoralizing. Mostly I feel really lucky to do it, but I'm always trying to figure out how to balance it with other things where I feel like there's not so much editorial oversight. And I do some of these things. This is a giant painting of my husband that I made and now don't know what to do with because there's no other giant paintings, it's just the one. And I love doing textile stuff. I make these big quilts that are so time-consuming. They're like applique and embroidery, and they're all hand-quilted, and they take hundreds of hours. And I was just talking to someone about wood carving. I once carved this tiny, perfect butt out of wood. Other things, too, but I think this, of all the things I carved, this was my favorite, and I'm always thinking about trying to kind of get back to that, too. And then this year I had this book come out called 1 Week in January, which was a really unusual book for me because it's not for kids, it's for grown-ups. And what it is I illustrated a journal that I found that I had kept in 2001, and I kept the journal only for a week, and it happens to be the week that I moved into that warehouse where Colin and I were having that wacky noodle battle. And for whatever reason, for 1 week, I documented everything that I did in very excruciating detail. I wrote down everything. And then I put it in a box. I printed it out. I put it in a box, and I found it like 20 years later. And it was like a weird find. It was just like every single day for a week, everything I had done. So it was sort of like finding a time capsule, and I liked it. So I decided to illustrate it. And that's what this book is. So it was different because it was a book for grown-ups. There could be like beer and cigarettes in it, and self-portraits of myself at 25. It was also really different because it didn't have the editorial oversight that I was used to when working on books. I did work with an editor. I published it with Chronicle, and my editor is a woman named Bridget Watson-Payne, who's a great editor. But she didn't really, she was more of like a sounding board. I didn't give her sketches. She didn't ask me for revisions. And I approached the whole project like I was creating a body of work for an exhibition based on this journal I'd had. And then once I'd made all the work, we just laid it out, almost like you would like an exhibition catalog. And it was so fun. It was so fun. I made like 30 paintings, and it kind of maybe like widened this little crack in me, this crack that was the crack in my, like happiness as an illustrator, and made me realize that I do really love illustrating, but I need to figure out ways to sort of do it where I feel more in charge, and also to step away from it completely at times, which is something I have not allowed myself to do because it's scary. Like, I couldn't believe that I managed to figure out how to make a living doing it, and then the idea that I would walk away from that is sort of terrifying. But I'm not walking away from it. This is Rumpelstiltskin, written by my friend Mac Barnett. I just finished this. I just have the cover to do. But after this book, which I'm just about done with, I don't have any other book lined up after it. It's like the first time in 20 years that I don't have a book that I have to dive into as soon as I finish this. And that's by design, because I feel like I just have to step away from picture books for a little bit, because then I can come back to them from a place of joy and excitement. So I'm in this sort of like weird, exciting place. I'm kind of on this precipice of, I have no idea what happens this year and next year for me, as I sort of try to like find my You can tell this is like the part of the talk that I haven't ever done before that I tacked on at the end because I haven't figured out what I want to say philosophically about it. But I think what I do want to say philosophically is that for me as an artist, especially working as an artist in a field where it's so collaborative and you do have to go against your instincts a lot, and also it's like fast-paced and your life is dictated by deadlines, I think it's been really, really important to me to stop and take stock at various points along the way, and then to sort of radically change course to make sure I'm still doing something that makes me feel like an artist and that makes me feel creatively gratified. Because I think if you're always in your comfort zone and you're never stopping to do something that you're unsure of, that feels like a risk, then maybe you stop being a good artist. I don't know, that's my working theory. I guess that's my working theory. I guess that's it. That's my talk. Thanks. I am happy to take questions from anybody who has them. I think we have a little time. Yes? I think it kind of rounds it out. I mean, I think, I was actually just talking to John about this. I wonder a lot who I'd be if I had gone to like a really rad school like this and studied illustration. I think about it all the time. But I do think I learned however I learned it to be an illustrator. It took me a lot longer than it probably would have if I'd studied it in school. And I do think that painting practice and that sense of making art without that oversight and without that brief, without that assignment, just kind of searching your soul and being like, what kind of art do I make? That feels really important to me. And having not gone to school for illustration, I can't really say. I would imagine that that's part of an illustration program too, is sort of getting to the core of what you want to do as an artist, not just how to successfully, do a job. But I do think it helped me a lot to spend so many years thinking about art without thinking about whether or not I was doing the job well, if that makes sense. Yes? I noticed on your Instagram, should I quit Instagram? Yeah, should I? Nobody knows. Yeah, pink sweatshirt.
I was wondering, how do you take the time out of your day to make your illustrations? Like, is there like a schedule that you do specifically?
Yeah, there is. I have kids, and they go to school. So their school day is basically my work day, and it has been since they've been school-aged. Before they were school-aged, I pieced it together for a long time. For a long time, I had a babysitter that came 2 6-hour days, and those were like my work days, and I was just really diligent, and sometimes I worked at night. And then as they got older, I had babysitters come more, and I had a mother-in-law that would help a lot, and I would just sort of like carve out these work weeks. But once they went to school, then I was just like, every day I'm in the studio when they're in school. Yeah.
When it comes to like time management for you, what does that look like a new process? How long would you say you spend on illustration?
Too long. Like way too long. And time management is like a real area of It's like one of my weak spots. I'm always behind. I'm always late on my deadlines. I'm always like kind of panicking at the last minute. I think part of it is that I'm like a bit of a procrastinator. Like I'll go into my studio and be like, time for work, but just because I'm in there doesn't mean I'm working. And then also I spend too long. I'll have like a illustration that should just be done, but suddenly I'll be like, this would be better if I repainted the whole background a slightly different color green. So that's a weird time management thing where I'm just like a little bit too perfectionist, and I make weird impulsive decisions when I'm painting that end up, making me spend like 2 weeks on one illustration, which isn't super tenable. Yes?
Have you ever had circumstances that kind of like forced you to have distance between your artist self, like whether it was like having kids or if there was like money was really tight, you had to get a different job that took on a lot of obligation, and how did you balance that?
Well, I think initially before I quit, service industry stuff, I was sort of balancing these two things. But then for a few years, I was just an artist, and it was so easy. And then I had kids, and that was really a hard thing. I felt like these two things were sort of pulling me apart. This like powerful compulsion to make art and this powerful compulsion to mother. And like I was constantly like the part of me that wanted to make art was resenting the parenting, and the part of me that just wanted to be with my kids resented the deadlines. And I feel like for a really long time, those two things were sort of just like pulling me apart a little bit. In a way that was sometimes manageable and sometimes just a massive, exhausting bummer. But it doesn't feel like that to me anymore because my kids are older. Now I feel like the things that are sort of pulling me apart are more these questions of like, what do you want to do as an artist? If you don't change course, if you don't like stop and really tune into what makes you happy and leave your comfort zone and try new things, are you a happy artist? Are you like making art that you like? That feels more of it. Now it feels like illustration versus non-illustration are sort of pulling me apart. Yes?
I have a Portland-based question. I basically was born in Portland, and I grew up reading the Wildwood books, and I think it's really interesting, like the place specificity that's present in the writing of those books, and I'm kind of curious, like in your illustration practice, when you got to illustrate those books specifically, how you like thought about place in that, and was that significant, and was that like important to make about the place that you were living, or did it did it just happen as it happened, and it was a busy time, and as it flows? But
I think more the former, the first thing you said, because we were, so for those who haven't been to Portland, Oregon, we also have a forest park, and it's this big wild expanse of woods on the western border of the city. It's like 8 miles long, and there's nothing there in most of the park except just trails. And there's something sort of weird and mystical about it, that it's just right next to the city and there's nothing there. So it's a place that I love a lot and where I've spent a lot of time. And the basic premise of the book is that rather than that just being a wild park, it's an impassable wilderness. And the reason why there's nothing there is because nobody can get in. Or if you do get in, you can't get out. So we did use that park as a template for this world. We even made the map by putting it over an actual map of the park. And the park has a few things in it, like an old mansion and Audubon Society. And so we used these like actual real life landmarks as landmarks in the book. And we lived in Forest Park at the time. And we actually wrote the book, or Colin conceived the book, on these long walks we took in the woods in that park where he would just like talk through the whole story. So it was like we were just living and breathing that place and writing about that place in that place. It's probably the most important character in that book, is that actual physical space. I'm sorry that I didn't answer the Instagram question. I just don't have an answer for it. If anyone has any thoughts on it, I'm open to hearing them. Yes?
How easy or difficult was it to get connected to independent art shops, like with like editing stuff and like making stuff for books? Like, did people
Initially, editorial stuff came from people I knew or people who knew people I knew. And then at some point, this is a long time ago, you guys, before Instagram and all of this stuff, there was a website that I know John will remember called the iSpot, where you would pay a chunk of money, like $700, to put your portfolio online, and art directors would use it to hire editorial illustrators and all kinds of illustrators for ad stuff too. And so that was like a big leap that I took that almost immediately was obsolete. Like, I don't know how long people used the iSpot for, but it was just long enough that I got a bunch of work through it from people I didn't know, and that was when I actually quit my day job because I felt like I was getting enough of it. In terms of book stuff, that's all stuff that comes through my agent. He sets all that stuff up. It's helpful to have a literary agent for that. Yes, in the back. I don't know if I do. I feel a little out of touch with it, to be honest. Back when I was really in that place and trying to just get as much work as I could, I just kept doing work regardless of whether or not I was getting paid to do it. So there was a lot of making flyers for bands for like beer tickets at a bar or something. And I just took every opportunity to make art that anyone gave me. And anytime someone was like, I'm making a zine, do you want to put a comic in it? I'd be like, yep. But I also feel like the world has changed a little since then. And so I feel like I can't quite speak to it the way I could back then. And sometimes when I say like, just keep making art and hope for the best, that's like the dumbest, most unhelpful response. But that's how I did it. To be honest, I got really lucky with the Decemberists stuff, because that just kind of opened up all these doors for me. It was so visible. It was like the art that I was making for that band. Suddenly, when people were buying their albums and buying their T-shirts, it was like my art got to go all these places that I wouldn't have known how to make it go without them. Yes? Oh man, that's such a good question. I don't know. I have a kids book community, like a handful of kids book people that I'm really close to, that I'm just in touch with, like all the time via text, but not very many people live near me. They're mostly people in California. So I feel like I have community, but my actual day-to-day life is like pretty solitary. I live on a farm with my husband and my kids. A lot of the people I hang out with are the parents of my kids' friends, who I love, but it's not quite the same as being like a warehouse with a bunch of artists where everyone's like, what do you think about this? Like, there's something about that energy that I love and miss so much. And I do still have that going back and forth with kids book people about kids book ideas, but that's one of the things that makes it so hard for me to step away from kids books, because I'm like, oh, this is some of my strongest creative connections are through this very specific form and field. And I don't know, I've lived in Portland for a really long time, so I have community there, and I have connections to lots of institutions there, like the art museum, and I have a gallery there. So I have our art community, but also I'm kind of an introvert, and I live in the suburbs on a farm. This is not really an answer. The answer is I don't know. I do my best, but I'm such a different person than I was back then. I'm like kind of a loner these days.
One more minute.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. I didn't even really say what this mysterious slide was about, did I? This was meant to be like my visual mood board thing. And a lot of it is like art or sketches that I've wanted to expand into bigger things, and a lot of them are photos I've taken, and some of them are found images. And this spooky medieval one with the devil and the two frogs. Do you see this lady with the green on the ground? She's next to this quilt. I really love that. It's from this medieval book of illustrations, and it's just like, as illustrations go, I think it's one of my very favorite illustrations. So I think that's my favorite. Or that lady with the wings on the upper left. Thanks for asking.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming out to the Sam Fox School tonight. If you are interested, if you're a person that's thought about going back to school to get your MFA, we have an amazing program here called the MFA Illustration Visual Culture. So come talk to me afterwards. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Bye.